figa so kama the rest. Kifika kwa base wana respect, juve nimedungu tajua mindo guess. Wacha kivasi Illuminati, wenye nadunga nafanya unakat, fanya research.
for them to practice what they were being taught on climate change adaptation. And of course, in 2013, we set up the Climate Change Fund, where about 70% of the projects that we executed in 18 African countries also focus on adaptation. And recently, we created a unit for disaster risk reduction and management, where we also try to support especially countries from the Southern African region, the SADC community, which, as we know, experience a cyclone every now and then. And in our rural transformation program, there's also the youth element, where we working with the rural youths in terms of promoting what they do in green jobs and as well as organic farming, in the sense that all of them are leading to adaptation. So maybe I will pause here and we'll come back with more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Opara, for highlighting some of those key game-changing initiatives that you were doing at AUDA NEPAD to help us build long-term resilience in Africa. Of course, you also have in AUDA NEPAD the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA, which is a master blueprint for infrastructure on the continent that was approved by African member states in 2013. And this is a very ambitious agenda, so many projects there and so on. And I think it becomes very timely that when we look at the innovations that we need to bring in place to make sure that this infrastructure, these projects have a long-lived resilience, it becomes really important in the conversation that we're having here today. So I would like us maybe later on to also talk a little bit more about some of those projects and how we can leverage other existing, and I'm sure Kanta you will mention some of those later, about how we can leverage what is existing to build the long-term resilience of that infrastructure. Because you see, there is a narrative, right, that Africa has got the huge investment gaps that have to happen in almost every sector. Then at the same time, Africa says that the continent is the region that is being impacted the most by climate change, right? And therefore, you have a situation where you need a lot of investments to invest in key sectors, water, food, ocean, and so on. At the same time, those sectors are being impacted by climate change, and if that is the case, how are you going to bring the investment to ensure that they don't become stranded assets, right? Because if you're going to invest, you want to be sure that you have innovations that can help you to make sure that long-term resilience is built into those initiatives. So my second speaker on my schedule is Dr. Jima. So Dr. Jima, I know that most of your work involves supporting countries to undertake several efforts, some of which are towards transformative adaptation and long-term resilience at the United Nations Environment Program. So can you walk us through what your top priorities are and how partners like yourselves support African countries, and how should these countries respond to access for the support that UNEP provides? Thank you. And I'm going to ask you, Dr. Kanta Kumari, because you are development partners, and so the two of you would like you to have the same response. Dr. Jima, over to you, please.
Yeah. Maybe better to use this one. Hello? Yes, it works. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator, and the audience and the colleagues, the panelists. It's a great pleasure for me as one of African citizens to sit here and discuss with you on a very top in the agenda issues of our sustainable development, that is the issue of climate change. So let me start, Mr. Moderator, to accelerate the transformative and longer-term resilience of Africa. Let me start from the opportunities and the challenges that Africa is facing. If I start from the opportunities we have, Africa is endowed with very rich resources. We have natural resources. We have local asset, indigenous knowledge and practices. But also we have cultures that can really help Africa to transform into resilience and sustainable development. And the other opportunity is governments and communities' commitment to build climate resilience, economy, and development. Of course, the growing multilateralism is another opportunity. The global, regional, and the national level commitment, multilateral environmental agreements, conventions, and framework are all the opportunity for us to adapt to the changing climate and build our resilient economy and bring Africa's development. But in terms of challenges, Africa is one of the regions who is impacted by the compounded problems related to climate change. I don't need to mention those compounded impacts on us that affect our livelihood, our biodiversity, our community, our economy, that also brought migration, conflict, to mention some, and health impacts. But also, Africa has an issue of fragmentation of interventions and also lack of inclusiveness of some of the initiatives, especially to the most vulnerable and disadvantaged groups in Africa. We have also inherited policy and governance issues and systemic planning problems, but also we have financial and institutional capacity limitation. So that's compounded, put Africa in a disadvantaged position. Though we have more of resources and opportunities, we have also challenges. So we need to overcome all these challenges to accelerate transformative and long-term development or long-term resilience of Africa. So what is needed? The action as a whole, before I come to what UNEP is doing in Africa or overall in the world, to build a resilient and long-term resilience and economy, we need to do a whole society and a whole ecosystem approach to avoid fragmentation, duplication of efforts, and wastage of resource. We have to think of the ecosystem is one, the society is one. A local action can bring a global impact. So with this context, we need to go to the whole society and the whole ecosystem approach. But also we have to think of the interconnectedness of the ecosystem from mountainscape to the seascape, that ecosystem is one, so the action should be a holistic approach we need to adapt. Above all, we need to enhance equity, justice, collaboration, and inclusive decision-making processes with the local community and the indigenous people, especially on benefit sharing and putting the most vulnerable at the center of our work. So at UNEP, we have 3 pillars of intervention to build the resilience and healthy ecosystem, but also community, to transform to a most healthy and also achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We have climate action, nature action, and pollution action. These 3 pillars will take us to address the 3 planetary crises of climate change, loss of biodiversity, and pollution. So under the 3 pillars, UNEP's intervention focuses on 3 areas: building the capacity of policymakers in terms of improving policy-making processes, legislation, policy harmonization, and institutional reform. The second intervention is on building capacities and helping countries to access to technology, based knowledge, and also transform the local indigenous knowledge into adaptive capacity to build a resilient and transformed society and economy. The third one is mobilizing resources, especially on investment, on conservation and restoration and sustainable use of ecosystems. For that, we focus on, as you see on the screen, we focus on a number of areas. The first one is bringing science policy with the local knowledge to influence the policy-making and decision-making processes, especially using the big data. UNEP is using the situation rooms to provide up-to-date information about the changing climate. We have the thorough environment review processes and annual and the yearly data that will really help the local action to be supported by the up-to-date information. At the local level, we are supporting, providing simple in the language. The farmers can use it in their farm. We're also bringing local level adaptation and community conservation practices and connected to the development of tools and practices that can help to transform our interventions. Of course, we're supporting countries on area-based management tools, such as the marine spatial planning, locally protected area management, but also we're supporting on integrated coastal zone management, adaptation and mitigation practices across the region. The other one is our support to the Innovation and Technology Hub. UNEP has Innovation and Technology Hub in different parts of the world. Those hubs connect local practices to the best science to enhance the adaptation, conservation, also transform it, but also up-to-date information to help Africa to build the capacity, not only Africa, but across the regions. The other area is finance. We're working through the UNEP Finance Initiative. We are working with a different bank, financial institution like bank, insurance company, and also some of the investment institution, not only for corporate and social responsibility, but also to enhance the payment for ecosystem services, the owner of the ecosystem, the resource that is a local community to benefit from the intervention, but also to sustain their businesses. The other one is promoting and supporting on circular, sustainable circular and the blue economy initiative, including supporting countries to assess the readiness of their blue economy sectors like the fishery, aquaculture, coastal tourism, coastal agriculture, seabed mining. So this is one of the assessment and the readiness work, including the support to the local government to develop a marine spatial planning and the sustainable blue economy strategies. And one of the beneficiaries are, for example, in Africa, if I mention, Kenya is one of the pioneer country, Ghana, Mozambique, who is working on ocean policy and ocean strategy. In doing all this, UNEP is supporting countries to deliver on their national adaptation plans, nationally determined contribution, but also the nature-based strategic action for transformative policy agenda to bring Africa's sustainable and resilient economy. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you very much, Dr. Jinma, for the great perspectives from the work of UNEP in this area. Before I continue, I just want to welcome Mr. Yusuf Mbechechi from Comoros. Welcome, sir. Okay. So, Dr. Jinma, you said a lot of things in your interventions, which are really important, and I like the idea when you mentioned about whole of society, whole of ecosystem, right? And this is extremely important because here during this summit, and before, of course, we've been hearing so much about nature-based solutions, carbon trading, and if you were in the closing plenary yesterday, you would have heard the lady who was representing the indigenous people saying that if it's not about us, if it's not with us, then it is not about us, or something along those lines, right? So you've given us all of these examples, and you mentioned about blue bonds, blue, green bonds, and so on. It would be nice if you can shed a bit more light on how communities have actually been involved in taking stewardship of the ecosystems, in being able to implement some of these innovations in building long-term resilience. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator, Dr. Liz. The issue is how we're bringing these boardroom discussions on the ground where the rubber hits the road. I mentioned about equity, ethical consideration in terms of blue carbon. We have a blue and a green carbon initiative, and currently UNEP launches the Green Gigaton Challenge. We used to do the Blue Gigaton Challenge. The issue is who is determining the price of the carbon and how much of that resource is coming down to the community. What recently we learned, one of my second slides was showing how concepts, approaches, and action are so fragmented, and we keep cooking nature-based approach, sustainable management of ecosystem, integrated approach, all this approach really driving us or distracting us to focus on the most vulnerable and the most deserved group of the society, because the resource, as I said, is from the community. Now at UNEP, what we're doing is more of bringing science, tools to support the local level ecosystem conservation. At UNEP, we are putting nature at the center of our intervention and action because the nature belongs to the society and nature is everything for us to build a transformative adaptation, but also to build the sustainable development across the region. The issue of that equity should be worked out by building the capacity of the community, by bringing the investors and the finance institution to invest more, not only on policy, on the implementation of the policy. So one of the issues for Africa is, in addition to the policy fragmentation, we have an issue of finance to implement those policies. The issue of policy harmonization, because Ministry of Water has its own policy without talking to the Ministry of Urban, and we have Ministry of Forestry and Agriculture, which have a different policy, but the target is to bring sustainable development. So how this policy can be harmonized, integrated, and work together is the key issue, not only for the UNEP, for the entire development partners across the horizon, to adhere to the priorities. Our intervention lacks to be demand-driven, so we need to listen to the government, to the people to which our service is needed. So prioritization, close to the community, listening to the government is really important. Now we're changing the gear toward that. Be focused and have the ear to listen to government and invest or support according to the demand and priorities. That is the key for me, and also what we're doing. Thank you.
Wonderful. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jinma, about that and about this issue about policy coherence, because policy coherence is extremely important and, of course, having to be centered around people. For example, like the idea of the Great Blue Wall, right? And say you can do mangrove conservation and restoration, let's say from Mozambique all the way to Somalia, but the entry point should not be about immediately the emission savings or whatever, but the entry point is how do you bring society, communities, and the environment working together, and then the benefit, let's say in terms of emission, becomes a byproduct, so to speak, or an end product rather than the starting point. So the investment is to invest in people, invest in ecosystem, and then with the result that you know. So thank you very much. So Dr. Kanta, you are also a development partner. So I'm asking you the same question about shed some more light about how you, the World Bank, as a development partner, is working to support African countries in building long-term resilience. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linus, and I'd like to very much appreciate the opportunity to be here with my esteemed panelists. So to your question, I think about what are some of these game-changing solutions and transformation adaptations for long-term resilience. I think this is a very important question in today's context when we think about development today. The World Bank obviously has a mission to eradicate poverty, to increase prosperity of particularly the bottom 40%, and climate change is really, undermining that particular objective that we have. And so I think that for some time now, I think the community, the world community, and of course the development community has realized that we cannot divorce climate and development. And if we do that, it affects the poorest countries the most, as well as the poorest. So at the same time, if we want to really get to the transformation and game-changing adaptation solutions and long-term resilience, I think one of the first things that we need to do is to really understand that interplay between climate and development, and Dr. Jima touched on some of these. But to do that at a level of granularity that can really inform our policy and the kind of policy coherence that we want, the planning, and the nature of the investments, because the type of investments, the design of investments will be different when we have to address the climate risks. To make that a reality, the World Bank, about a year and a half ago, embarked on what we call a new diagnostic, which is the Country and Climate Development Reports. These reports really look and analyze what is that interaction, what does climate and climate risks pose in terms of economy-wide impacts, and what does it mean at the level of sectoral and cross-sectoral investments. And I think we do this across the economy. So we've completed this for about 25 countries. We're doing another 25, and those will be completed by the end of this year. So what have we learned from these? I think what we have learned is that, countries' GDP could be impacted as much between anywhere from 2% to 12% by climate impacts. But what we also learned is that it is the poorest countries who will be most impacted, and they would have higher GDP losses with less ability to cope with those. So when we think about these transitions in the systems and transformation and long-term resilience, we need then to get down to what does it mean in terms of the basic needs. So in terms of the broader agenda of the bank being development, we clearly also have a climate change action plan, and within the African context, we have a next generation Africa climate business plan, which has very clear priorities, which are development centered. No surprise, food security, water and environment security, urban resilience and green mobility, energy access, clean and green wherever we can, and managing climate shocks. But let me come back to the country climate development reports, and I want to share with you very briefly 3 countries where we looked at the issue of water being really a foundation for life, and water with all its intersectoral linkages with agriculture, with industrial needs, with domestic needs, and livestock needs as well. Let me start with Rwanda. We looked at Rwanda. For us to have transformational and long-term resilience in the context of climate, we have to look between now and the longer term. So what we did in the case of Rwanda, deploying the best science and tools, we looked at water evaluation and planning processes. And what is the situation in Rwanda? Rwanda is a country where the demand for water is going to increase manifold. So what happens is between now and 2050, you have a multi-level increase in water demand. And they do have a good water vision plan for 2050. So we look at the baseline, the water vision plan, and we look at the climate resilient water vision for 2050. The good news is that, the water vision climate resilient plan will actually increase the demand by 9-fold, and if you don't look at the resilience, it increases by 13-fold. So there are a lot of efficiencies and management that you can bring into it, which will therefore also decrease some of the costs and some of the infrastructure design being more resilient. And this is really important, but then water, of course, is not just water. It means it has impacts on the way you look at your water and environment investments, the way you look at agriculture, and the way Rwanda needs to look at hydropower, because that water scarcity will creep in, and so you need to think about diversification. So this analysis really allows that kind of understanding, the planning, and beginning to look at those investments for the resilience of today versus the longer term. I'd like to also share a contrasting example of what we did in the G5 with a similar analysis on looking at water issues. Here are the set of countries that have very low water availability, and that water stress will magnify, and by the end of the century, 70% of the water deficit will begin to creep in. So you are looking now at a situation where you're trying to increase the water access. And so the recommendations in the case of the G5 Sahel really focus on increasing that water availability, increasing some of the irrigation infrastructure for efficiencies, and diversifying the water sources, and really looking at things more from the sort of core development perspective, which itself will be threatened by climate change. And so, we can go on with multiple examples, but I think the reality is that, so when we talk about transformation changes, and we want to bring it down to the people, we want to bring it down to the sectors, we really need to understand how that resource management and the economy-wide impacts will creep in between now and 2050 to enable us to do that. And it's not always bad news everywhere. In Cameroon, where we did the similar analysis of looking between now and 2050, it will have a wetter and warmer climate. And that also means that we were able to show that there were some areas of investment which could be well supported including in irrigation. Of course, efficiency is one part, but expanding that to support the agriculture economy within the larger context. So I just want to stop here and sort of, come back to more discussion, but to share with you that any game-changing solutions, particularly in the context of the region, really has to be grounded back, I think, to the people context, to the national and local economy, and understanding where the trade-offs are. But mindful that, in some countries, we come back and really have to address some of the baseline, but with a new resilience lens to them, and in others where we can harness the opportunities to bring that resilience to bear in a broader part of the development trajectory, always making sure that the trajectory moves towards the development with a low carbon climate resilient lens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kanta, for those enriching perspectives of the experiences that you're getting from the countries from this country, climate and development studies. You also mentioned particular examples about water and resilience and so on. But I was just thinking as you were speaking, some of these issues are very transboundary. And when you talk about water, African countries have one of the highest water dependency ratios, which means that almost every African country is dependent on the other one for the water that comes into it or for the water that goes out of it and so on. So I was just wondering whether you have a plan to be able to now begin to look at these country studies at the regional level to see how resilience could be built more through a regional approach from the insight that you get from the country studies. And you also mentioned something about when we look at climate change, right, it's not every place is getting dry. Some places are getting drier, some are getting wetter. And that reminded me of the work that we ourselves, the World Bank and the Economic Commission for Africa did in 2015 on enhancing the climate resilience of Africa's infrastructure. And that was showing that river basins like Zambezi could be very, very sensitive, but whilst others like Congo may not be the same. So now we have the Africa Continental Free Trade, and we're talking about resilience. I'm just now being inspired by some of the things that I heard, and I'm trying to think a bit out of the box here now. Now, if you have the Africa Continental Free Trade that allows for free movement of people and goods and services, because of climate change, we know that some places get drier, some places get wetter. We know that ecosystems shift, agroecological zones shift, and so on. Now, this becomes an important thing, building from those kind of country studies, to begin to say, where is it that we can now grow more, let's say, maize, than we didn't used to grow before? And where is it that we now know that we have to do more tea, more cocoa, and then use the continental free trade to let those things flow? And then that way, we don't have to worry too much. We have built-in resilience. Is this the kind of innovation that you foresee? And I'm saying this, and I would like my other panelists, when you were talking, you can also want to bring this idea as well. Do you foresee this way of building resilience, leveraging Africa Continental Free Trade, understanding climate change impacts, looking at suitability, what is now suitable here and no longer suitable there, and so on, as a way of also building long-term resilience? So maybe you can just say a few words, and then I will then move to my next.
No, you're right, absolutely. I think, the unit of action, the unit of analysis, can definitely be broadened and I think nested at various levels. And while this particular focus was very much in the context of looking at it at the country level, and when we say country, we know it's still, nested within counties and provinces and down to the local level. Similarly, we can nest it upwards. Now, why did we begin at the country level? That's not the end point. There are other diagnostics that do look at the regional context. So we, for example, have the West Africa Coastal Areas Program, but to what you're saying, because there is some economies of scale, not just on the knowledge side, but on the capacity side, on the way that, as you mentioned yourself, viability of some of the crops that are planted in some countries will change. Movement of people will occur. We've done some work at the World Bank recognizing that, there is the climate-induced mobility that could happen. But even then, when we look at it, we looked at it very much within the country because that's sort of really where the mobility starts, and to understand what are the underlying factors. But I think when it comes to river basins, we definitely have to look at the upstream, downstream, the opportunities for sharing and agreeing to certain protocols and management, and this has been done in some of the large river basins. You mentioned the Zambezi area, but also in the Nile River. I think there have been lots of agreements and protocol over the years. And climate is acting as another driver to help us to go back to some of the agreements and understand how those climate risks. So just to make the point that I think you have the right, and I think that the free trade agreement is a great umbrella under which some of these issues can be discussed, but it also is very useful for countries to understand what are their challenges and bring that into the discussion in a constructive way. Sometimes when it's too top-down, the countries don't feel that they are in the driver's seat. And I think by having this country-based analysis, it allows for a better conversation and dialogue moving forward. Thank you.
Wonderful. No, thank you very much, Kanta. So I would now like to turn over to Mr. Yusuf Becheshi. Sir, you lead the Directorate of Climate, of Environment and Forest. Yeah. At the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Agriculture, Fisheries, Tourism, and Handicraft in Comoros.
Yes.
Fantastic. And of course, Comoros is a classic example of a country where the blue economy and this type of things, building resilience and solution, becomes extremely important. So can you please give us an example or give us some indications of the work that you are doing in the country in terms of building a long-term resilience, and what do you see as some of the challenges and opportunities in scaling up those initiatives to take resilience in Comoros?
Okay.
Thank you.
Mesdames et messieurs, je vais m'exprimer en français. Je ne sais pas si les traductions marchent ou...
Yeah, there is interpretation, and there are headsets, colleagues, I think, at the back, if you want to. I've been informed that there might be difficulties with the translation, but anyone with a headset, are you hearing interpretation? Okay, so sir, I think you can start, and let's see whether there is any interpretation.
D'abord, je commence par m'excuser du retard occasionné, parce que je n'étais pas ici dès le début de la session. En effet, le sujet que nous réunissons ici aujourd'hui nous amène à réfléchir en d'autres termes sur la résilience du secteur de l'eau, de l'agriculture, de la pêche, afin d'assurer la sécurité alimentaire dans notre région. Réfléchir sur la transition systématique des secteurs comme le secteur de l'eau, de l'agriculture et de la pêche pour un monde résilient nous semble très pertinent afin de mieux prévaloir la sécurité alimentaire dans le continent africain. Et comme vous le savez, notre continent, c'est le continent le plus impacté et qui possède le moins de moyens pour y faire face, malgré que nous sommes le continent le moins émetteur. Et selon les études de vulnérabilité réalisées dans la région de l'océan Indien, l'Union des Comores, à l'instar de tous les pays ou États insulaires, subit du jour au jour en plein fouet les conséquences néfastes liées au changement climatique. Et pour y faire face, le pays s'est engagé très tôt dans une démarche de planification pour élaborer des documents, stratégies et plans d'action pour s'adapter aux impacts néfastes liés au changement climatique, notamment le plan national d'adaptation, la stratégie et la politique nationale sur le changement climatique, la CDN, c'est-à-dire le programme pays, et le plan Comores émergent. Dans le secteur de l'eau, comme vous le savez, le continent africain est le continent auquel la migration climatique ou la mobilité climatique qui est causée par la tarification des lacs et des océans qui oblige les populations, surtout rurales, plus exposées, à s'y déplacer d'une région à une autre pour chercher soit de l'eau pour le pâturage ou d'autres, ce qui engendre plusieurs conflits entre régions et régions et parfois meurtriers. Conscient de ce problème, l'Union des Comores.
So I don't think that the interpretation is still working right. So my French is not very good, but maybe if I can just quickly summarize, I think what I heard you saying so that you can get the flow. Is that okay? I quickly do a summary. So Dr. Yusuf is saying that Comoros being in the Indian Ocean and in Africa where it's one of the regions that is very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and that because of climate change, you're having various impacts including acidification and also water scarcity. And the result of that is that people are having to move from their communities, which are being impacted, to move to other areas. And in that process, is creating a lot of tensions as well, even though the country has developed a national climate change strategy and action plan, especially in the context of the revision of their NDCs. But these climatic stresses are causing a lot of impacts to vulnerable communities. Is that right, Dr. Yusuf? Yeah? So please continue.
OK. Je viens de le dire que le continent en tant que tel subit ces problèmes surtout liés à l'eau qui engendrent des déplacements, ce que nous appelons au niveau scientifique la mobilité climatique, des populations les plus exposées à une autre population, ce qui engendre des conflits et parfois meurtriers. Mon pays, conscient de ce dramatique, a vite mobilisé tous les moyens pour faire de ce pays un levier du secteur de l'eau en mobilisant une cinquantaine de millions de dollars pour passer du 15 à 65% d'ici 2025 le taux de désertation au niveau national.
So Comoros has mobilized some resources to increase access to by up to 65%. By 2030?
20 at 65.
65% by 2030, yes.
Pour le secteur de l'agriculture, ce secteur nous semble le secteur le plus levier pour le PIB africain, en dehors des pays producteurs et exportateurs de pétrole. Et ce secteur, c'est le secteur le plus impacté par le changement climatique dans le continent africain.
So agriculture is also the sector that is mostly impacted by climate change, and it is also the sector that most people's livelihoods depend on.
Ce secteur a besoin d'être renforcé et nous profitons pour cette occasion pour plaider en faveur d'un secteur agricole résilient qui garantirait un système alimentaire plus durable. Il faudra pour cela privilégier l'amélioration des investissements agricoles, la formation des jeunes et des femmes, l'amélioration d'accès au marché national, régional et international dans le secteur agricole, la promotion de l'éducation aux bonnes pratiques nutritionnelles et agricoles, surtout des femmes.
So for that reason, it is important to build agricultural resilience and at the same time provide capacity development, especially for women and young people to harness the opportunities that come with climate-smart agriculture.
Pour le secteur de la pêche, comme l'agriculture, la pêche est un secteur primordial pour l'Afrique en général et pour nous, les États insulaires et côtiers en particulier.
Fisheries is also another key area, especially for Comoros, because a lot of people's livelihoods depend on that, and it is also being impacted strongly by climate change.
Actuellement, dans les régions Afrique et côtiers, et surtout dans les îles, la pêche reste toujours artisanale et commerciale. Au niveau de la région de l'océan Indien, la pêche contribue près de 5% des prises mondiales de poissons, ce qui évaut d'environ 4,5 millions de tonnes de poissons par année.
So the Indian Ocean region, where Comoros is very important for global fisheries and food security in the sense that it accounts for about 5%, right? About 5% of global fishery supplies.
Il est donc plus qu'urgent d'exploiter, de gérer et de protéger durablement les ressources maritimes pour mieux appréhender au bien-être de notre population. Et pour cela, nous plaidons pour la bonne gouvernance des océans et la promotion de l'économie bleue dans le continent africain.
So for that reason, the blue economy is extremely important for Comoros, and it is therefore important to have a governance, regulatory and management approach on how you harness the resources of the blue economy for the betterment of the people of the region.
La gouvernance des océans et de l'économie bleue constitue des priorités pour les États insulaires et côtiers, mais aussi pour le continent africain en général. Récemment, la ville de Moroni a accueilli la conférence ministérielle de l'économie bleue et l'action climatique en Afrique et a mis l'accent sur le changement climatique en reconnaissant le rôle primordial que jouent les mers et les océans dans l'adaptation et l'atténuation au changement climatique.
That is why it is very important to have this governance and framework for harnessing the blue economy. This is very important for Comoros, and that is why Comoros had a Blue Economy Conference in Miroroni and came up with the Miroroni Declaration on better use of blue economy resources for the people.
La conférence ministérielle de Moroni a donné des résultats très importants, et notamment à la déclaration de Moroni, auquel nous plaidons pour la vulgarisation de cette déclaration, comme celle de Nairobi, pour que l'Afrique se base sur ses propres stratégies et plans d'action pour se positionner dans les négociations au niveau national, régional et international.
So the Miroroni Declaration, which was from the ministers' ministerial meeting that the head of state convened recently, basically speaks to the Nairobi Declaration that Africa has to have a very strong strategic approach onto how it manages and harnesses its blue economy and other natural resources.
La déclaration de Moroni plaide ainsi pour un soutien à l'initiative de la Grande Muraille Bleue, pour une économie bleue durable et régénératrice, et leçon d'un appel pour un nouveau partenariat dans l'économie bleue en renforçant la coopération, les partenariats et les collaborations.
So implementing the Miroroni Declaration will require new partnerships and cooperation approaches.
La déclaration de Moroni plaide enfin pour promouvoir les pêches durables, assurer une protection des écosystèmes côtiers et marins, assurer une gestion efficace des déchets marins et plastiques, renforcer la sécurité et la sûreté maritime dans notre territoire national, mais également dans les zones hors juridiction nationale.
So the Miroroni Declaration emphasizes the importance of having to promote sustainable fishing, reduce ocean pollution, particularly in terms of plastics, and also having a strategic approach on harnessing blue economy resources.
Au nom de mon pays et mes collaborateurs qui sont dans la salle, nous vous remercions de votre patience et merci.
So he's saying that Comoros welcomes the partnership to drive the blue economy forward and welcomes everybody to work together in that direction. So thank you very much, Mr. Yusuf. We really apologize for the fact that the interpretation was not working, but I hope that I did my best to give you the essence of the strong messages that were coming from Mr. Yusuf's interventions. So I will now switch over to my young sister, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you just completed your tenure as the Global South Focal Point for Youth and Children's Constituency at the UNFCCC, UNGO. And you are also very much involved in the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change and many other efforts. And as I said in my introduction, I like your energy in this area because we've been together in various discussions. So please, can you share with us some of your reflections on how youth, who make up the majority of the population in Africa, can best prepare to contribute to the transformative adaptation and long-term resilience in Africa? So you have about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so Thank you so much for the platform to speak, and thank you to the organizers of the event for inviting me to speak on such a great panel. First and foremost, I want to say that if we are really serious, or if we really do want to advocate for change, we need to change the mindset. So I have to change my mindset, and you also have to change the mindset. In the work that I've been doing, not only on the regional level, but also on the global level, you'd find out that when the older generation want to engage young people, it's mainly about, do we have young people who can participate in tree planting? Do we have young people who can participate in cleanup campaigns? I think we now need to change that narrative. Because the problem with that is when we are now implementing, when we are now in the implementation phase, right? Because we have not taken young people as partners, as people who are capable to implement, then young people are not in place. Not because they cannot, but because you do not trust and you do not believe in their capabilities. So one of the things that I want to mention is issues to do with capacity building. Capacity building itself is an adaptation tool that is quite important and very relevant. One of our leaders from Zimbabwe always says that a resilient community should be capacitated. So what we have done over the years is we have used peer-to-peer education, making sure that we also reach out to other young people out there, making sure that they understand the dynamics of climate change and how best they can put solutions in order to adapt and mitigate to the effects of climate change. But I will also not end there. A resilient community is also a healthy community. How can we make sure that our communities are healthy through different adaptation measures? So we've started advocating for agroecological practices. If you're familiar with agriculture or the term agroecology, you'll see that agroecological practices, one of the principles, focuses on soil health. Last year, I relocated to the United Kingdom, and I have regretted this choice for reasons being which I'm going to state. I want you to follow exactly what I'm going to say. So if we are talking about agroecological practices, we are looking at soil health. When you are a farmer, when you plant your crops, each and every farmer understands that you cannot put or you cannot continue to put on another crop if you don't retain the nutrients that you have taken from the soil. And over, we have been using fertilizers. What are they doing to our soils? They are degrading our soils, right? And at the end of the day, even the foods that we are eating, they are not healthy and quality foods. What are these foods going to cause into the human body? They are going to cause different types of diseases that we are not even prepared to fight for, right? We don't even have the solutions to fight for these diseases. Now, my relocation to the UK, the foods that we have in the UK, they are highly processed foods. Everything that you eat is full of sugar, right? Highly processed food, short-term shelf life, which is not good for anyone. Right now, if you look at the UK, we have quite a number of diseases. People are struggling with obesity. People are struggling with a lot of diseases, right? And in Africa, you know, because of the foods that we eat, they are not so much processed. It's very easy to maintain, you know, it's very easy to have a healthy diet. But what we do not understand is that, you know, we have been brainwashed to think that, you know, fertilizers, they work, pesticides, they work, etc. But we have not put into consideration what all these things will do in the future in the future for our communities. How are our communities going to be resilient if young children continue to be sick, if our older generations are sick due to different chemicals that we are putting into our cells. So one of the things that young people have tried to do to solve this solution is to use organic methods to make sure that even whatever we are putting in our cells, at the end of the day, we have a good quality product. I'm sure you have heard about water hyacinth. People say water hyacinth is an invasive alien species. Yes, it's an invasive alien species, but should we continue to cry that it's an invasive alien species? So this is actually an adaptation measure that we have actually, we've done experiments through the water hyacinth weed to try and test how it is good on the soil. We have realized that water hyacinth is actually a good organic material that we can actually use as a substitute of fertilizers. And at the end of the day, we can actually have good products that we are proud of that can serve the community, not only serve the community in terms of their tummies, but also make sure that they do have health lives and we do have health and resilient communities going forward. Whilst we're still at it, young people have been quite active in the region. And if you see within the space, you know, older generations, they're always saying, young people, you are only active in terms of activism. From the beginning of this presentation, I said in order for us to advocate for the right change, we need to change the mindset. So what I want to say is the older generations, they've managed to change our mindset. We have got to a point where we have realized that, yes, activism itself, it does not pay. We now need to be technocrats, or we now need to at least play our part in the implementation of different policies that are introduced within our countries. Now, what we have done is we have taken a step further. But as we have taken a step further, it also seems like government representative, implementing agencies, they have also not prepared themselves that we also have young people who can also be technocrats. We also have young people who can also be innovators. So you will see that even with our, early warning systems, right? We always talk about climate models. This is also another adaptation tool. For us as young people, it's not a matter of having these climate models available, but we are also ensuring on making sure how best can these climate models be accurate. So if the climate models are accurate, it means that we can prepare our communities well on time because they are giving us the data, the right data that we need, and young people are also training on how they can be able to process that data in a way that even a simple layman can actually get to understand what this data is saying. So you will see that in this whole system and in this whole process, young people, they do have the solutions. But are you ready to trust them, and are you ready to give them that platform and that opportunity to execute all these, dimensions that I have mentioned?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for being fired. We have to stop the cappuccino effect, right? So we have the cappuccino effect of youth, where you make your coffee and then you just sprinkle the youth on top. Now you want the youth to be part of the coffee, not sprinkled on top. And you're absolutely right. And they are doing it because I think we're somewhere here in Kenya where I met a group of young people like you who are doing exactly what you mentioned, the early warning system, which I was going to bring, and I'm thank you for that. It's extremely important. But these young people are beginning to use mobile services to collect climate information and then turn it into a service that they use to give out to farmers. So they say, okay, it is very unlikely that the rains will not come early, so don't plant. Or it's very unlikely that there will be crop failure. But if you need to take insurance at a smallholder level, these are the providers that you could have and so on. So that is already a wonderful innovation that you're mentioning. We organized the Climate Change and Development in Africa Conference, which is an annual one, as a official pre-event of the summit. And I was fortunate to meet this young lady, Dorcas. She's a Miss Climate Kenya. And when you were speaking, I was just remembering some of the things she was saying, because we talk about climate change impact, long-term resilience, but to really get a feel about what that means to real people on the ground, she was telling us about something called Girls for Grass phenomenon. I don't know if any of you have heard about it, but you have small pastoral communities, right? We heard from President Ruto that because of the prolonged droughts and so on, he's now having to divert funding from school feeding programs to try to deal with these issues. And Dorcas was telling us about these pastoral families with small livestock herd, and because of the prolonged, they're losing a lot of their livestock. But in the same communities, you have richer, bigger farmers who have more land, more grass, and so on. And the poorer ones that have very little livestock, which is very much at risk of losing, have to marry their young girls to the bigger ones in exchange for survival, basically, to have more access for grazing and so on. And because it's from the Maasai culture, apparently, to marry those girls in those ways, you have to do female genital mutilation, which is illegal in the country, so they have to do it illegally. And then when they do it illegally, it goes wrong. Now they're afraid to take them to the hospital because you'll be arrested and so on. Now you see how the real change, climate change impacts, we'll be talking about GDP and so on, but this is how it affects real people. And young people like you, young people like Dorcas, they have the solutions. And indeed, I wouldn't say that you should be given the space. The space is not given. You take the space, and you're already taking it, and we're already seeing the solutions. So I really want to thank you for drumming home that message for us. But as you also mentioned, that they need to be capacitated. So I'm very pleased to also then say that we have various mechanisms, and ourselves, the African Union Commission, the World Bank, and the African Development Bank, with the support from the Nordic Development Fund, established a training program called FRE, Africa Climate Resilient Investment Facility. It's an open source learning program. We've trained quite a number of young people, about 60 people so far. It's done through our training institute in Egypt. It's online, but it's also in person. So young people are welcome to do that because it gives you the confidence, learning about what climate resilience really means. How do you apply climate resilience in specific sectors, water, energy, agriculture, and so on? And how do you then use that as a way of building momentum towards mobilizing climate finance? It is available to capacitate young people like you to come up with this innovation, because we know that the youth are really innovative, and we've had some of the wonderful examples. So thank you once more, Elizabeth, for helping us to really bring home that message. So colleagues, we have about 15 minutes left to go. So I would now like to ask our colleagues in the room, for any questions you'd like to ask, either it is specific to a particular panelist, or a general question, or a comment that you want to make, or an addition that you want to make, please, you're welcome, indicate. Take the microphone, just say who you are, where you're coming from, and then make your comment, your question. The floor is open. And by the way, whilst we're waiting to see if people want to make interventions, this FRE program that I mentioned, we're actually having an event on it at 12 o'clock in the River Limpopo room. So if you would like to learn more about it, please, you're welcome. So anybody would like to add something, ask a question, make a comment, make some suggestions, please indicate. Yes, please. Lillian, do you have a microphone? Oh, it's a standing mic. Right, it's a standing mic, so sorry. So which means you have to walk to the, sorry about that. You have to walk to the microphone.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ahmed from Comoros. I'm going to speak French because English it's very difficult for me, but I have a simple question. Ma question, on parle des conséquences climatiques. Quand j'ai écouté les panélistes, dont je les remercie de leur présentation, qui a été assez claire, on focalisait les idées beaucoup plus sur les adaptations climatiques. Moi qui est du domaine de la météorologie, je me pose la question, quelle est la place réelle des méthodes ancestrales ou méthodes autochtones qui étaient auparavant des méthodes vraiment utilisées sur l'adaptation climatique et que ça avait donné des résultats auparavant. Aujourd'hui, quelle est la place de ces méthodes-là dans le contexte actuel du changement climatique? Merci d'interpréter. Merci.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. So Ahmed is saying that he's a climate scientist, and we're talking about climate change impacts, but we're focusing more about climate information and services and how you use that to build adaptation and so on. But we are not really focusing and investing on indigenous knowledge and solutions, which have for time immemorial been the real solutions that have helped communities to build resilience. Therefore, what is the role of that knowledge, and how do we scale it up and scale it out? Because it's practiced differently in different places. Why are we not focusing more about making more use of that knowledge? So that's the argument's question. Okay. Any other ones? We'll take two more before we come back to the panelists. Yes, please. So you need to use the microphone, yeah? Sorry, it is not mobile. Just stand behind the microphone, yeah? Because there are people online, so the people online will not be able to hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Koto Daniel Dayon. I'm from Benin. I'm one of the delegates of the International Youth Climate Delegate Program of COP28. So my question is addressed to the representative of UNEP. On your presentation, you talk about the different pillars of your intervention in different countries. You talk about technology aspect. You want to work with people at grassroots level and engage with innovation. So I miss one thing on your presentation is about youth engagement on your activities, on your different action on the country where you are working. So I want to know more about it. How do you try to engage or support youth on your main action with countries? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Any other one? Yes, so please just use the microphone. After that, and then we can come back to the panelists.
Good morning. My name is Daisy Mosso. I'm a doctorate student in climatology. My question is, what other adaptation measures can be undertaken within the ASAL communities to ensure long-term resilience among those communities, given the reduced drought cycle besides water harvesting?
Thank you very much. And then, Madam, you, and then we'll come back to the panelists.
Thank you very much to the moderator and the speakers. I think all the interventions were quite interesting. So just two questions on my side. Firstly, it was a question on the country-based analysis. You mentioned that you've done 25 countries so far, and you have 25 that you will still do. So, sorry, I forgot to mention my name. I'm Zoti Disiveche. I am a program officer under Agriculture and Food Insecurity Risk Management at AUDA NEPAD. So those country-based analyses are quite interesting to me because we've done a few, and we find that, you know, in the countries, different areas have different risks. So you find in one part of the country, you know, the risk is maybe droughts, but in the same country, a different area, the priority of floods. So I just wanted to know those analyses, or do they look at the different areas, or do you prioritize? How, you know, is it reported? And then the second question, it builds up on what the first gentleman mentioned about the indigenous knowledge, because I also didn't hear that coming up a lot. I mean, we've seen some wonderful innovations, CSA innovations, but we also know, you know, adoption of these technologies is slow for various reasons, but we have so many innovations or indigenous knowledge. So really, to any of the panelists, how are we really, you know, trying to advocate, to share these indigenous knowledge practices, also to make sure that even the youth, you know, themselves are accustomed to this, and they also can even build up on that instead of waiting for some technology which requires funding, and then a disaster strikes, and then we haven't recovered, and then another disaster strikes. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for your questions. So, esteemed panelists, you've heard the questions. I think the issue of indigenous knowledge and its application and scale out applies to all of you. So you can give your perspectives on that. Then the rest of the questions were specific to you. And so if you can please address the specific questions to you, and then also this issue about how we make use of indigenous knowledge systems to strengthen long-term resilience. So let me just go from Kanta all the way to Yusuf.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much also for the very good questions. Let me touch on a couple of them. I'll start with the local indigenous involvement and how we work with them. I mean, there are many, many initiatives and projects that draw on those knowledge, but let me share with you what's happening in Kenya. In Kenya, there is a project that we're supporting, which is a nationwide project covering all the 47 counties, driven by the decision of the decentralization and for each of these counties to have its own climate change action plan. So this project was conceived in a way, it is called locally led climate adaptation. And the idea was that any of these county climate adaptation plans should really work bottom up and engage the communities and be also led by them to capture their knowledge, to capture the particular risks they are facing, and to build that into the action plan. And I think the interface between the indigenous knowledge as well as other information and knowledge that is brought to them, that synergy is really important. In some cases, indigenous solutions work and continue to work. In some cases, the indigenous solutions are being challenged, and I think bringing that together with other technology and information is extremely important. This is a program that is unique because it is one of the very few, in fact, probably the only one that we know of in Africa, which is a nationwide, locally led at the level of the counties engaging locally. So we can talk more about it, but there are colleagues here who work on that program and lead the program together with, of course, the Kenyan counterparts. Coming back to the country climate development reports, these will technically be done for every country at some point. We've completed 25, we're doing another 25, and we've started on the third batch. Basically, we do them in a sequenced way so that the analytics from this actually feeds into what we call our own country partnership framework, so that it's better informed. Now, in the context of your question, whether it's just done at the national level, no, what we do is there is a methodology which is partly macroeconomic, but it's also driven by sectoral deep dives. So normally there's one on energy or water or agriculture. Whatever is the country's development priorities, we discuss with them, and those most at risk from climate. But we also do a spatial level because, as you rightly said, there's some sub-regions that are more vulnerable, and the kinds of vulnerabilities also differ across the landscapes. So I'm happy to share the link with you, but I think if you typed World Bank Country Climate Development Reports, you should be able to access them. And if you have an issue, please do feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very excellent intervention and questions from active audience. Let me start from the indigenous knowledge to climate change adaptation, and then answer to the specific question the gentle young man asked me. On indigenous knowledge, I think the time has been an issue. How we are supporting indigenous knowledge with the technology and information system. I will be forced to mention some of the examples. For example, in the Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia, Sudan, we have a big pastoral community who is the largest hit because of changing climate. From 10 years to 5 now, each year there is a drought in that region, and what we're using is there are traditional wells. The traditional wells are almost 1,000 years old. They exist there. This community doesn't worry about any geographic boundary. So they follow the rivers, the lakes, and the traditional wells from ancestors. So we have done an analysis, and we study about recharge of those wells during the dry season. And it used to be like 20 people going down to the wells to get the water, one give to the other by bucket, and then they able to water their animals and camels. For that, what they did is using the solar energy to help them to pump those wells, but also helping this pastoral community also do a little bit more of watershed management work, which they just know much, they don't know that. So you bring, if you are planting these grasses, if you're planting this bush and leave them, and you do a rotational grass use or feeding system, it will be recharging for you. This is like a simple information as simple, and then you have to tell them. We are using also, as I said, simple range climate information centers for the community at the market. The information center really helped the community to learn what is happening, how they are using rotationally, wisely their resources. It looks very small, but you are supporting thousands of people, millions of people, and also the transboundary movement of the community. For example, a traditional knowledge on rituals, like respecting trees, respecting some rivers. It's not as traditional per se, but it's very important to live in harmony with nature. So we are supporting so many people in Asia. They call it tarabandu, not to cut tree. If you cut, this will happen. People come and curse you, and something happened to your family. We may not believe in this generation, but it works. So celebrating and attaching some legal points, traditional laws, really help the community to conserve and respect the nature. This knowledge, traditional knowledge, is not just traditional. It should be transformed to the youngest people, to the new generation, to learn that respecting respecting nature and wise use of resources are really important. The other area is livestock insurance, because someone was also asking me about the issue of water scarcity. It's hitting so many areas. Livestock and crop insurance is happening in many parts of the Africa and other regions. For the, what we're doing is, they have thousands of cows and the camels, but they are like siblings for them or children, but you have to teach them that. When the drought comes, thousands of them die. So you better now sell it in a good market, and then you keep it in the bank, which will be supporting you to get that money when the drought comes. And we are also importing grasses and feeds from some wet areas. For that, the community has been taught, oh, it's my child. Some of the nomads take the cows into the market and they return them back because I can't sell my cow, my ox. So you have to bring this knowledge, like this animal insurance, crop insurance it looks simple, but it's really helped the African community, other community also to be resilient during drought and flood seasons. We are working on that, as this is part of technology. And as I said, the simple ranges, the information centers, market areas, these are all the information sharing where we are bringing the information from complicated data analysis, situation rooms, you take it to the community, to the climate centers, and the small, using mics and talking to the community. This is going to happen, especially in Asia where I worked. Because of storm and the tsunamis, they really work. The community here to get prepared for this, like very rapid onset issues. In Africa too, we are doing that. So the work has been started, but it's not enough. As we said, and as is highlighted by the youth representative, the more we work with the youth, the more we bring them to close to the issue, and they also a solution-oriented youth to be work more with us. UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, we have Youth and Advocacy Division. That is one of the biggest divisions in the UN. And we're working so much with youth ambassadors for different issues, for plastic pollution, for ecosystem, for corals. We're bringing also celebrities to work with the youth, so many across the world to make sure to my intervention. And we are working with the Innovation Challenge with the youth on circularity, waste treatment. They innovate and they get award and initial capital to invest on that. On the food processing, on the, also on energy. There are so many initiatives, and also youth are very close to technologies in terms of data analysis and helping governments to know what is happening in the ocean, what is happening around us. So unless you know what you have, you can't appreciate or manage. So this is like bringing information close to the government, to the people we are working through youth. It's a big initiative, including the scholarship for the youth on a specific technology is taking place. Okay. I think I can stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Wonderful. And I want to put you on the spot, Dr. Jinma, because if this track is about transformative adaptation solutions to build long-term resilience. And you've given a lot of wonderful solutions. And I'm sure that if these solutions were taken to the field, like where Dorcas is, they would not have had that experience. So can I put you on the spot that I will link you up with Dorcas, and UNEP would actually go to her community and implement some of these solutions?
Absolutely. That is our role. We are here to provide a demand-based support to the community, and also We have learned, I think, we are very clear that the
No
youth
problem.
are
I would take that challenge.
Yes.
I will link you up, and I'm hoping that at the next Africa Climate Week, you and Dorcas will sit on the podium to talk about the solution in our community.
100%. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Elizabeth, please. We are running out of time now, so let's be a bit quick. Thank you. We have run out of time, actually, but let's...
Yeah, I will not even take much time. I think just to echo what a colleague who asked about indigenous solutions, I think what I just wanted to say is she mentioned in the beginning of her presentation the importance of having a multi-stakeholder approach in tackling issues to do with adaptation and resilience. And I think it is quite important to make sure that even the indigenous voices, they are acknowledged. The problem that we have in the region is this information, there is less documentation on information on how, indigenous people would adapt and, mitigate to the effects of climate change. And I would also want to encourage any researchers in the house, especially young students, etc., reach out to the UN agencies and or even the governments, and check if they do have resources to support you to make sure that this information is available for people to understand, because you can never make people understand things that, is not documented. So we need a lot of research. We need young people to be supported. Yeah, I think I'll just end there.
Thank you very much. I will try and do a little bit of synthesis based on what we did on the Rural Youth Project, as well as adaptation. For example, whereas in our project we work with South African Weather Service, also trying to work with the local chiefs to sensitize them about issues regarding climate change, to say when the animals are dying due to drought, it's not because of ancestors being upset, it's a result of drought. So we introduced early warning system with the South African Weather Service. However, in Zimbabwe, they said they didn't need early warning system because certain fruits shows them during the season. If it bears enough fruit, means the season is going to be favorable. They will plant early. But those fruits, if they don't bear enough, means it's a signal that they shouldn't plant early. So that's where your indigenous knowledge comes in. Even in the youth, they say, no, we don't need you to teach us how to do our farming. We need only access to market. And by the time we visit their farms and what they are doing, you see that what we call innovation is a bit overstated, because they're already practicing urban farming as well as free-range farming. So this is where now your participation and inclusivity comes in when you're developing your project and program, so that you get a sense of what are the issues, and how do you also use the indigenous knowledge to solve some of those problems? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vincent. Very important about how we have that value chain of early warning to early action and using indigenous knowledge as critical solutions for long-term resilience. And finally, Yusuf.
Merci à nouveau. Moi, je plaide, comme je viens de le dire, pour une économie durable. Et cela, il nous faut une pêche durable, une agriculture rentable et la gestion intégrée des ressources naturelles et surtout des ressources en eau. Et tout ça, ce sont les bases d'une économie bleue durable et résiliente. J'appelle dans ce cas à la prise en compte et à la vulgarisation de la déclaration de Moroni sur l'économie bleue, prise en compte dans les documents nationaux, régionaux, ce qui nous permettrait de parler dans une même voix dans les négociations internationales et notamment dans la prochaine COP à Dubaï. Je proposerai ainsi les deux déclarations, celle de Moroni sur l'économie bleue et celle de Nairobi que nous venons de les adopter, de prendre ces deux instruments en compte et se baser sur ces deux instruments pour parler d'une même voix dans tous les groupes de négociation auxquels nous faisons partie dans la prochaine conférence de partis qui aura lieu à Dubaï prochainement. Et je vous remercie.
Thank you. So, Yusuf is just again re-emphasizing the importance of the blue economy and the importance of integrated resource management and sustainable fishing based on the principles of the Mironi Declaration as a way of working together, building partnerships to build long-term resilience. So, dear friends, we've run out of time. And I really want to thank you all for the patience and the listening and the contributions. Above all, I want to thank my esteemed panel for having shared with us some wonderful ideas about how we can make transformative adaptation to build long-term resilience. We don't have time to summarize, but I think we have all heard and participated in the conversations, and we really look forward to taking these conversations further and to be in a position where at the next Africa Climate Week, we're able to actually see how we have actually made some of these transformations to make impact in real people's lives. So thank you very much. I apologize about the interpretation, but thank you very much, and thank you for your contributions. So in the next event now is about the use of climate information services for building long-term climate resilience, adaptation and resilience in this room. So please, you can stay for that event. It's very important because it actually builds up to this. We heard about early warning to early action and coming long-term solutions. So please stay for that next event. Thank you.